And I have joining me on the news at 10 to discuss the MANGU Benue killings, the CEO, Beacon Consulting Limited, Dr. Kabir Adamu. Good to have you join us.
Good evening.
So when you look at this particular crisis, it's as old as some people. It's been there for years upon years, and it seems not to be abating. What exactly is the problem and the nature of this crisis?
So it's essentially rooted in resource control, land, and then issues around access to that land. You can also mention about the socioeconomic grievances that have pitched two communities against the other. And then, of course, the political dimension that has taking advantage of the identity issues, the fact that there are two communities. Each of these two communities has a distinct identity. One is farmer and is essentially Christian. The other one is Hada and essentially Muslim. Political forces have taken advantage of it and sadly are driving the identity issues and using it to perpetuate the kind of violence that we're seeing. Now, over time, the state government, as it were, and to an extent the federal government, has attempted to use security forces to address these challenges without necessarily really going to the root causes. I've talked about land, I've talked about identity. As long as these issues are not addressed, then sadly, there is no number of security forces that will be deployed that will bring the crisis to an end.
And the president has now given a directive. He talked about arresting the perpetrators of the killing. But, there was a part where he also mentioned, community leaders and religious leaders, traditional rulers, and other sociocultural groups coming together to also address this crisis. In line with that directive, what exactly are the solutions, to this crisis?
Yeah, I mean, very heartwarming hearing the president looking at this from a wider perspective than just deploying security forces. Totally, it's a whole of society thing. All the different segments of society, the traditional leaders, the religious leaders, political leaders, economic leaders will have to come together and accept the fact that they must live together. Sadly, the narrative that one hears, even in the opening report that you heard, speaks about one side attacking the other side, when the reality is that both sides are attacking the other. And until that is admitted and brought to the table, and the issues that are leading to the attack are also addressed, then sadly will not come to an end. And I think at the center of it is the administration of criminal justice. If we can strengthen the administration of criminal justice to identify offenders, irrespective of their identity, irrespective of their status in society, and arrest them, and then ensure that they are prosecuted, then this will be brought to an end. For as long as the narrative speaks about only one side attacking and does not distinguish between when an offender, for instance, is of a certain identity, then he or she is not spoken about, then sadly this issue will continue. The second point is the proliferation of small arms and light weapons. This carnage is only being done where there are weapons. So we need to also look at where these weapons are coming from, make sure that the weapons are identified and retrieved from wherever it is that they're getting them from. Then lastly, the role that our religious leaders and traditional leaders need to play in that. Our traditional leaders, our religious leaders need to play a bigger role by speaking against the kind of criminality that we saw. As far back as May this year, when this current cycle started, in my consultancy, we released a report to highlight what we were seeing and what we were hearing. The fact that communities were being attacked on both sides. And I want to emphasize this. It's not just one side doing it, it's both sides doing it.
And like you mentioned, it's quite important to, mention the narrative. And perhaps maybe that would also be a framework for that meeting, between all sides. But I wanted to ask, because we're hearing from the House of Reps, asking the National Security Advisor to declare this particular crisis as a national emergency, what impact would that have if that were to be done?
So first off, I find it a little bit odd that the House of Representatives, which should be the custodian of our laws, is asking a national security advisor. I don't know anywhere in our constitution that the national security advisor has the power to declare a state of emergency in any part of the country. That right or authority is vested in the arms of the president. At best, the national security advisor can advise the president on the basis of certain conditions that he sees existing in a location in the country. And even then, in my understanding, I think the president will have to seek the consent of the same assembly that is making that advice before that can be done. So I think that is dead even before the advice was given. I'm not sure how come that came from, but they need to speak and understand the positions of our constitution, especially when it comes to security matters, before making such advice. Now, having said that, can this national security advisor play a role in that regard? Definitely, yes. These issues are rooted in our common humanity, our existence as Nigerians. So there's nothing wrong if the national security advisor goes in, conducts an investigation, a sociological research into the root causes, and I'm emphasizing the word, the root causes of the crisis particularly in the Plateau, in Benue, and several other parts of the country. One common feature that exists in almost all the crises is what we've termed non-state armed groups that are armed and are wielding the ability to use those arms. Why are they armed? Where are the weapons coming from? Why are they challenging the supremacy of the use of force by the state? I think the national security advisor.
So basically, the proliferation of light weapons should be, in focus here as they begin to handle or search for solutions to this particular crisis. We'll see how the security operatives, respond to the directive from the president. Thank you so much for talking to us as always. The CEO, Beacon Consulting Limited, Dr. Kabir Adamu.
Thank you for having me.